Leadership is a strange partnership where you don't get to demand anything. Leadership is the idea that people choose to line up, and not just behind you, but beside you.
Thank you so much, John, for joining us on the 3 Points podcast. This is a personal and professional pleasure.
Thank you. Really appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we were just chatting about my maybe unorthodox or unique reach out to you, where I told you a story about how many moons ago, when you had just set up the ABC in Manchester, the Amaechi Basketball Centre, I begged a family member to drive me there. I don't know what I was expecting, John, but I just walked into this incredible sports facility, basketball facility. And I walked in, I was like, this is amazing. And we must have spent 15 minutes looking around and then we left. But for me, it was so memorable. And because I'd been following your basketball career, yeah, it was super inspiring. That was such a cool thing that you had brought to Manchester.
Yeah, I'm really grateful for it. I think, it was really the hard work of Joe and Maggie Forber, pulling it all together. And a lot of goodwill from a lot of people to make it work. The school where we built it, it took a lot of real partnership in a time where people could have been very skeptical, because it's not like basketball was a thing then. There's actually 2 arenas in Manchester now, 2 basketball centers in Manchester. So it's a good thing. I just want places where people can safely explore themselves as much as play sport. You can safely try stuff out, be creative, fail, and be surrounded by people who don't point and laugh.
And that's where I think this opportunity, and why I think it's such a delight for me and for us to have you here, is because I obviously have followed your basketball career. I'm a huge basketball fan. I still try and play, and I actually, I've seen you walking around NBA London events and sort of been following you from afar. And then as I started following your professional career, John, in this leadership space, I was like, what does John not do? And I thought, how interesting, because a lot of the work that I bring, a lot of the work that I do is connected to my experience in this sport and understanding what makes great teams work together, and leaders. So I've just really enjoyed watching you and learning from you, and those who are not following you on LinkedIn need to, because you put out such valuable content to the world that is somewhat countercultural. So I just want to thank you for that, and we're grateful to be able to follow you.
It's a good description. Somewhat countercultural, bit of a jerk at times. I think that's a good translation also.
Well, isn't it fun, because it means you're not just adding to the noise on these platforms, you're actually presenting an alternative perspective.
Yeah, I want people to know that there's another way of doing this. I think it's, I watched a couple of episodes of this podcast beforehand to be prepared. And I think, I don't speak for you, but I think that's what you're interested in too. There's another way of doing this. And I'm so frustrated that so many people seem to think that there's only one way to be a leader. And it's if it's not a man, it's certainly masculine. If it's not an extrovert, it's definitely someone of that order. And all of these criteria, to me, are pictures of leaders of the past. They aren't pictures of leaders of the future, because the future is, I know I'm old to lots of people, but I consider myself an early adopter. I love the idea. I used to hate it, but I love the idea that new research, new data, new insights become available, and I have to shift what I thought was the right way to a new thing that can be more effective. And that's what leadership is going to be now. It's not going to be like, oh, when can we go back to how it used to be? Those leaders is, well, everybody in the office, everybody. It's like, we're going to adapt.
I want to get into our topic around creating high performance cultures, but what else can you share about yourself that will help position this for those folks that don't currently know you?
I am a nerd. Is the most important. I'm a psychologist. I'm a chartered psychologist. I'm a chartered scientist. I am incredibly interested in the development of our profession, of the psychological profession. I think in this world, you can see how I was just actually listening to one of my colleagues who's an educational psychologist talking about how in this world where we've got people with special educational needs and also just the really disruptive environment of school and the way that people are impacted by the world around them, whether it be poverty, hunger, social disruption, we need more psychologists, but also in work, we need more psychologists who can really be practical and understand, not just theoretical and academic. I teach at the University of Exeter Business School, um, very practical courses to try and make sure that we create the leaders that we wish we'd had.
Oh, love
That's what I
that.
want. Let's create the leaders that we wished we'd had. Exeter is brilliant, without and despite me, because it's really focused on sustainable leadership, sustainability as an ESG type of thing, but also sustainable leadership, and that to me is the first point around high performance cultures. They are sustainable.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm spoiling this by jumping ahead.
No, you're actually you're perfectly pivoting into the first question that we like to ask, John, when we talk about the topic. So you've touched on it already, but let's double down on it. Why is creating high performance cultures so important to you?
I want to win. I want to win, and I don't want to win by a little bit, right? I'm not interested in increments. This is the thing that comes from a sporting background. Nothing else remains. Certainly not the physicality, and certainly not the body fat percentage. But from that era, what remains is this idea of I just want to kick your ass, because I know that if I can beat you by 30 today, I'm 10 points ahead the next time we play.
Mm,
I know if we beat you by one, you think there's hope. And so that's the approach I bring into this. It's a very practical, commercial idea of how do we win together. So high performance environments are ones where you can do this sustainably. You don't burn through people. It's one of my first principles of high performance environments, is that high performance environments shouldn't have a body count. Because part of this thing for me of that work shouldn't have a body count is also about a mental toll, because work should be difficult and challenging and stretching, and at times feel almost too much. But the people you're surrounded with shouldn't make you utter the sentence, I have to be brave at work, or I have to be courageous to speak up, because there are very few jobs where that's reserved for, and they mostly involve guns or fires, right?
yeah.
It's fire service, it's military, it's that extreme. And I don't understand people saying, well, you got to have a courageous, it shouldn't be a courageous conversation. If I'm telling you something that's challenging and difficult, it should be a conversation about thoughtfulness and care.
Yeah. How do you foster that? How do you foster that environment, John? Like, let's stick on your first point. We I know we've been dipping in. I work shouldn't have a body count. It shouldn't take courage to be at most work, and you've called out the exceptions, and I that makes complete sense to me. But how do we go about creating that culture in the context now of high performance?
Yeah, be super explicit first,
Hmm.
because I think people, they throw some words out, and they're often kind of very esoteric and well crafted, and they say, from this divine the culture here. And sometimes I think we just need to tell people, without being paternalistic, because I think I was too paternalistic when I first started off. I was very strict about, if I saw somebody working after hours, I'd be like, no. But to me, it's like, hey, if it makes you feel a bit good, just at 6 o'clock at night or 7 o'clock after you've put kids to bed or whatever, to check you to make, I'm not going to be a part of that. But I need you for the long term. And you can't do that if you're still working on stuff from 6 in the morning until 9 o'clock at night. So that is prohibited. You just can't do it. That's who we are. If we need you to work late hours because of client in Los Angeles or in Singapore, that's early hours, then you get that time back, and in the same week, because sleep debt recovery doesn't happen 4 weeks later, right?
Yeah.
And it's not me being nice, because I'm not nice. I want to win. I want to win. And so if you want to win, sleep deprivation, there's a wonderful guy, who you should have him on. He's better than me. Pete Olasuga, he's called. He's a sports psychologist, utterly brilliant. And he talks about the impact of sleep debt and stuff like that. But sleep debt, you can look at it like a 10 to 15 IQ point deficit.
Yeah.
It's like coming to work drunk.
Yeah.
Is that a company that wants to win?
Yeah.
4 hours of sleep, 3 hours of sleep. Yeah. Welcome to coming to work drunk.
It's it's so what I've loved about what you've said is make the implicit explicit. I also like straight talking language. I know you're lecturing. I know you're an academic. I know you're a nerd. I just like to call it how I see it, and just be clear so that there's no ambiguity. And
Yep.
it's so important, right? Because as you say, we can get lost in these words and people read them and they don't actually know what they mean. And we've got to be proactive. What's your view? Like, let's talk about an anecdote or a story, maybe even in your team, John, where you've seen your team burning burning the candle at both ends, as my mother used to say, or going too late, or you see an email come in at 9 p.m. You're thinking, hey, Chloe, what are you doing? Like get on.
Yeah,
Like, how
yeah.
do you manage that yourself as a leader?
So I've had that conversation with my colleagues at the moment. I think I've got three colleagues, my boss being one of them, who are working too hard.
Yeah,
And I know why they're working too hard, but I keep telling them, I don't want you here today or this week. I want you here for until you're done with me. Right. Until you're bored and you need a new exciting thing, in which case I'm going to tell you to piss off and go and do that new exciting thing, because that will be a sign of success. But until that thing hits you, I need you here, and you're hurting your chances of you being here in a year's time
yeah,
by building up the cortisol in your system with the lack of sleep, by building up the kind of broad emotional toxicity of dealing with stuff all on your own and not sharing the burden. And
yeah,
that's why I had the conversation. It's just super explicit. I think one of the skills of leaders is a vigilance. The idea that you look at people and you think, I've noted today that you're a bit different than you normally are. I'm not going to say anything today because everybody has that one commute, that one thing, and it might be none of my damn business. 2 days. I've noticed it 2 days. On the third day, if I notice it, we're having a conversation. And that conversation is going to be a scripted, easy conversation that everybody knows what is going to happen, which is, hey, Tony, I've noticed a difference in your behavior over the last 3 days. I'm not trying to intrude. I know I might not be the person you want to talk to, but I want you to know I've noticed. And if there's something that we can do about it, I need to know.
yeah,
And it's just the fact that I've noticed so many people, especially men, are helped by men who notice,
mm,
by other people. It can help when it's a colleague,
mhm,
when they just notice there's a difference, and then don't intrude. Don't tell them you must tell me what's going on in your life,
yeah,
because sometimes it can be awful things, or sometimes it can be something small that's just meaningful to you. And either way, it might be none of my business. But I need you to know that I noticed and that there is a system in place here, and
yeah,
not just a system to coddle you, but a system that it says, maybe this is the time for some active recuperation for you. Maybe we pull you off this and put somebody on. And instead of you kind of languishing, we say, go do something that's going to fill your cup, that's really going to get you back and ready.
yeah.
And then we'll swap you back in, sub you in.
And I'm going to come back to the language you're using, and it's not because you're fluffy or super nice and it's a family. It's because you want to win, and that makes sense to me. Like John, two things that I try and do, and I also advocate this with the folks that we work with, and I'm curious if you do this or if it's something you advocate for. One is yeah, like principles of like we don't do X and therefore it protects us. Now, I'm not into rules. I'm into principles, right? So like if you're off work on holiday, like I don't want you checking. That's kind of a principle. There's no expectation, but we explicitly call it out. Don't be online. And if someone comes online, you should not be online. So that's the first thing. And the second thing that I really like, because I like language and I like little short phrases that kind of ground me. And one of the things that we say, today we've done enough. Because my goodness, John, there's always more to be done. And I always say to the team, today we've done enough. And at the end of the day, that's enough for today. It's not as much as we thought we would get done. It's not as much as we'd like to get done, but today we've done enough. So those two things, like what's your view on kind of principles for teams as well as kind of mantras, philosophies, language?
So I love the second one, because I think it's more applicable. We used to do that when we were all together. We had an office, and we spent a lot more time co-located. We're remote first now. We still spend a lot of time together, but we're remote first. But when we were together, we do this thing called a big move. And a big move was the idea that we looked around and it's noon and we've done a ton of work. It's usually towards the end of the week. It's not always a Friday, but towards the end of the week. And we're like, it's your equivalent of we've done enough. But it was like, oh, because our office was right in the middle of Covent Garden. Um, and we'd say, all right, so it's PF Chang's, or it's something, and it's not mandatory. But what it is mandatory is that you stop.
Very good.
You don't have to come along, but you have to stop. You don't have to stay for 2 hours or 3 hours. You can just have a Diet Coke or whatever else, and then be on your way. But it's the idea that I love that. I think it's really good, and I like your version better because we haven't been able to do big moves because we're not all together. But we can say to each other, we've done enough, and I think
Yeah.
I'll adopt that. Thank you, stolen.
Hey, listen, we're all learning here. My goodness, and
Yeah,
I like the vigilant language around what a leader should be. Should be vigilant, and we're gonna dip in now to your second point, John. And we've talked first and foremost about, look, work shouldn't have a body count. I think we're all aligned there, and I suspect most folks that are listening are going, yes, I go to work. It's not my family, and I want to feel safe to speak up, and I want to feel like I'm not having to absolutely burn myself out to a point where it's actually catastrophic. Your second point, which I suspect is also um, a way to avoid the first one, which is the dangers of leaders who lack self awareness.
yeah, devastating. People broadly who lack self awareness are dangerous.
Mm.
I, I'm stopping because sometimes I say things that I instantly know are way too hyperbolic. People who lack self awareness are dangerous to other human beings. People who lack self awareness are dangerous to other human beings. This is a truth. And it's dangerous on a number of levels. One, because most people who lack self awareness don't know that they lack self awareness. Um,
That's very meta.
right? Professor Tasha Eurich is her name. She's brilliant, and she is like a guru of self awareness. I'm sure you've seen her stuff. It's great, right? But 95% of people think they're self aware, uh, and we all know that's rubbish. Highly self aware, in fact. And then when she kind of does research and asks, she finds about 10 to 15%. And there's the harm, the first harm that people do. You
Mhm.
think you're self aware, but you're not. So you're automatically operating in ways that you have no idea the impact that they're having. The second way is that lots of people are internally self aware. There is a certain kind of man that you speak to, and they will shake your hand in a way that moves you around a lot. Um, And then they'll say to you something like, the thing you need to, especially if it's the first time you've met them, the thing you need to know about me. And then often it's followed by something like, is that I'm direct and honest. And everybody listening to this knows that that man is an asshole. Everybody knows. And the sad part is they may not intend to be, because directness and honesty, especially for someone like me, I think these are important qualities, but they're curated by care and thoughtfulness and an eloquence about how you describe what it is that you're spotting.
Mhm.
And if you don't do that, then direct and honest comes across as callous and cruel and dangerous. And that's these people roam the hallways in powerful positions, and they think it's a sign of goodness that when they walk through a hallway or show up in a Teams meeting or something, the room kind of expands around them and people shrink into the corners. And it's because people look at you like you're untamed. And that can't be right, right? That can't enhance performance.
And the scary thing, John, is, yeah, not only are they roaming the hallways, they're leading organizations and people. They have people's lives in their hands. Both. I mean that quite seriously, right? I mean their financial livelihood, well-being, and so on. So it is scary. I'm like picturing all of. I also like the example of the person says, "Hey, I'm direct." It reminds you of the other joke that if you're looking around your group and you're not sure who the jerk is, or it's probably you.
Yep. Because the more senior you get, the less good you are at knowing yourself, right?
Yes.
How you're seen. And that's partly a function of managing up and hierarchies and things like that. But we do have peers. And then with our peers, we engage in this conspiracy of silence where I've watched you and I, we're sitting around a board table, and I've watched you now for 6 months. doing this one small thing that always makes everybody think, asshole. And I've said nothing because I've thought, oh, I think Tony's a good guy. He's all right. Doesn't mean anything by it. So the conspiracy of silence. And then you've been watching me for 6 months and saying, why does he interrupt junior colleagues?
Mm.
I know he doesn't mean anything by it, but why does he do that? And you've never told me, and I've never told you. And so the two of us are sitting here with like we've eaten greens or salad, and we've got salad stuck in our teeth. And we're both looking at the salad in each other's teeth, and neither one of us is telling him, you've got salad in your teeth. And to me, this is the conspiracy of silence amongst leaders. That means that they continue to do harm when they could be getting more self-aware every day if they just said, you know what? I know you want to be the best possible leader. I've spotted something that's getting in the way. Can I
Yeah.
tell you about it?
And that let's go deeper into that, John, because right, so we know the negative impact. I wonder how many how many leaders are open to this, and how do you get them to be more open to themselves, right? More interested in becoming more self-aware, because they might say, and this is what I've experienced in the past, both when I've been an employee but also in the work, that there's a little bit of, as you say, conspiracy, but there's also, I've got to this position, I'm clearly effective. I wouldn't be in this leadership position if my behaviors and actions weren't working for me. So why would I try and change?
Because leadership isn't about things working for you.
Mm.
Leadership is a strange partnership where you don't get to demand anything, because that's management. Demanding,
Mm.
delegating, these things are management. Leadership is the idea that people choose to line up, and not just behind you but beside you. Leadership is the idea that you're the kind of person that makes other people want to step in front of you in certain contexts where they have a particular skill, and push someone else they know has this particular skill in front when it's their time. And you are the kind of person that all of them know that their position will be enhanced by that stepping up, rather than you getting jealous or somehow, hurt about it.
Mm.
Leadership demands that we are not frightening, because nobody follows frightening. We chase the monster. We do not follow the monster. I am a 6'9" black man in this society. I am pretty much our society's definition of a super predator. People are not scared of me unless it's dark. But in this context, they aren't scared of me because they know that my physicality will only ever be used to support them. They know that the hardness of my voice will not appear. I'll be disappointed, and nobody wants to get my disappointed voice. But if one of our clients comes after one of my people, even if they've done something wrong, that's my job, or more appropriately, my boss's job. But if you come after them, you'll face me. And
Mm.
everyone knows that. But
Yeah.
also it means don't let me down by making sure this link isn't in here, that
Yeah.
I'm not equipped with some piece of information that I need, that it's a quid pro quo of
Yeah.
mutual support that makes leadership work. And they choose to stand by you. They don't follow or fall in line because of regiment, order, fear. That's it.
I like that. I love that, actually. I love the choice element, and I like the side by side. And sometimes they go in front, and that your team know when to do that. John, how do you personally, whether it's with your clients or not, but how do you close the gap between how you think you're showing up for people and how you're perceived to be showing up, and in order to increase that self awareness?
So for me personally, um, so I curate everything. So I know you can't see much of my background on this format, but if you saw the whole background, everything that's back here is, I've just moved house, so my green screen is not, my wall is not painted. So then you'd see even more of how well we curate, because we've got a background that's a certain shade of blue that took 40 hours of work to find, that conveys intellect, calm, you're safe. Books that I wrote, some awards that show that maybe I'm not a dummy. Um, some old on this side, there's like Star Wars and old school sci-fi, because there are real things about me, but they're things that you might not expect if you first looked at me. I do wear glasses. I'm blind as a bat, but there is also the fact that I wear a particular kind of glasses, which helps people to think, "Ooh, clever," because that's not what people think when they see big, bald black people. So I curate myself, and not for my convenience, because my convenience would be wearing sweats and a t-shirt and having nothing in the background, but for the convenience of winning in the context of that partnership. I need you to understand that I'm here to help you and that I am capable of that. So I'll do it. But you've done the same thing, because you have a particular set of images behind you that tell people, plus the curation of the way it stands behind you does this. So we all do this. Some of us have to do it in a more protective way than others, but we all try and curate that image. And I think it's important to do for me, for my clients. And it's less important over time, because they suddenly, once they've had the first two conversations, suddenly realize, I get what this guy's about. He's robust. He's challenging. He's going to give me great feedback. He's definitely going to tell me what he thinks is part of the solution. And if I'm part of the problem, he's going to let me know that too. But it's going to be in a way that is empathetic, kind, but direct.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like two layers. It's like the first layer of, this is John, this is Tony, and then that creates the environment to go the next level, and then it becomes, as you say, it's kind of it's more obvious because you're explicit, you're thoughtful, you're intentional with how you show up. So, John, let's move into your third point. I'm conscious of time, and I want to make sure we squeeze you for all you're worth here and get lots of good
No
stuff
problem.
out into the world. The third point that I was following some stuff I think you were speaking about on LinkedIn, and again, I just can't say enough that if you're not following John, please do follow him there and check out his book as well. But culture is defined by the worst behaviors tolerated, and I honestly came off a client call this morning and I referenced this. I said, I can't believe I'm meeting John Amaechi later because we're about to talk about this. And this is exactly what we're seeing happen in this relationship. And we need to step up. So let's talk about this.
So I love, well, I mean, I shouldn't love this because I came up with it, but so I'm a bit self-congratulatory. But lots of cultures think they are defined by flowers and fish tanks. Food, flowers, and fish tanks. If you go into these offices, you know, Salesforce office with their amazing 3-story fish tank and whatever else. And it's not that I think we shouldn't have fish tank, but flowers, food, and fish tank, bananas in the office, free coffee. People think this is what tells us what kind of, or in the city, increasingly, the idea that you're allowed to not wear a suit and be a bit casual is somehow a sign of your, it's the behaviors that you tolerate. That's what tells people it's the poor or non-optimal behaviors. I'm not talking about the egregious behaviors. That stuff is easy. When someone is openly misogynist, it is easy. Racist, it's easy. Everyone's fist is in the air saying, well, this is an outrage. Let's do something about it. Pitchforks, fire. The problem is the small stuff. When your junior colleagues have had their hand up on Zoom or Teams for 45 minutes of an hour-long meeting and no one has called on them. When nobody's been able to finish a sentence, whether it's in person or otherwise, when an agenda is hijacked or ideas are stolen, when certain people who aren't called John or Tony somehow can't have their names remembered properly and get a nickname from day one, so they're never known for the person that they are, they're erased. All of these things. And then you can add on top of that the kind of diversity elements, the inclusion elements of that too. But even if you don't talk about those, you can see how the bullying cultures, the idea that poor behavior is not okay in people who don't deliver, but people who've got big P&Ls, they can be complete assholes.
Yeah.
That's the stuff that tells you. It's the I know we've not got much time, but this is, to me, is the, when I just moved from Covent Garden into kind of Shoreditch, Aldwych, I don't know where I am, but it's nice. But when I was in Covent Garden, the courtyard in front of me before the pandemic, it was full of professional services companies, and they would pour out at lunchtime, smoke a cigarette, and drop it on the floor. There's bins, but they're dropped on the floor. And I always tell people, is littering okay? And nobody ever says, yes, littering's okay. But it is okay. If you mean it's illegal, I agree. There are about 34 laws on the book against littering and fly tipping. But it is okay. And we know it's okay because the person wearing the lanyard who dropped the cigarette is stood next to a person wearing the same lanyard who didn't. But they didn't say anything. They didn't do anything. They didn't say, hey, that's not what we do around here. They didn't look at them and say, look, I'll pick it up this time, but don't do it again. And that's how this one piece of rubbish turns into 10, turns into 50. And that's what happens in cultures. That behavior you let go, it metastasizes. It becomes this major problem and a risk event at some point.
And thanks for sharing. I think it's a really good visual. Covent Garden, people, behaving in a certain way and everyone accepting that behavior. And so this resonates with me, John. And I think what I really want to, in this kind of closing couple of minutes, is let's talk about how we solve it. And I think it starts with leadership. I suspect you do as well, to create the environment for the rest of the team and the organization and the wider society. But tell us about some things that you think about with regards to the antidote. How do we fix this?
So behavior change is what we need, right? This is perhaps a weird perspective for a psychologist, but I am interested in mindset. But people think you must change mindsets to change behavior, but you can change behavior to change mindsets too. And the reality is that people aren't impacted by what other people think. They're impacted by what other people do. And instantly people always say, no, 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 I met somebody and they never said any words, but I knew they hated me. But there's a contempt face that we can all recognize. That's what we're doing with our face. There's they never said anything to me during a meeting, but that is doing something when you're the only person they don't say anything to. So what we've got to do is change behavior. That requires a number of things. And this is not my work. I'm always at pains to point out this is stolen. I've told her, she knows. But there's a wonderful woman called Susan Mickey, who is kind of the mother of behavior change. She's a health psychologist, somewhat controversial, wonderfully spiky, and I love her. And she talks about behavior change being, this is kind of my interpretation, being a function of behavior, knowledge, capability, opportunity, motivation. Knowledge. Please notice knowledge, not awareness. Awareness is the sickly stepchild of knowledge. Not one of us could do our job if we were aware of it. Imagine, Tony, going to your next client. Can you help us with this? Yeah, I'm kind of aware of that. They're moving on, right? They're moving on. We're human beings. We deserve people to have a more deep, integrated knowledge of us. So there's knowledge, and then there's skills and tools. All those things that I've been using, those scripts that I use in response to different scenarios. Don't try and be clever and creative in every moment. You can build on that later, but just have a response in this moment, because those skills and tools are what change your vigilance into action. So there's a study out there, I know we've not got time, but there's a study out there that talks about most men notice gender microaggressions. So about 70% of men notice that, and they feel a tension in their chest and they don't know what to do. So the gap is not that they don't notice it, it's that they don't have the skill to say, oh, Tony, I'm sorry, we don't use that language here. Or actually, the term you're looking for is this, Tony. See what I mean? There's an actual script that you can just learn that solves that problem. So we've got to turn that thought of passion about culture and leadership into knowledge and skill that we commit to implement.
I'm going to wrap us up with one final question, which we like to ask everyone after they share their 3 points. And thank you so much. Again, just to recap, point number one on creating a high performance culture: work shouldn't have a body count. We're all bought in on the impact if we don't live that out. Second, the dangers of leaders who lack self-awareness to other humans. I love that you clarify that, to other humans. And the third point there, which is the one that has really resonated with me and my thinking, my belief system, is that culture is defined by the worst behaviors tolerated. Let's assume we all leave this and everyone adopts it across the world, right? We start implementing these 3 points. How do you think that might change things in the world?
People would take better, good chances with each other. We would embrace friction as an essential part of progress. We would be suspicious when things were quiet and everybody agreed. We'd look around the room and wonder why nobody had a different idea, and we'd all become immediately scared that somehow we've missed something. And the constitution of our organizations would shift because we'd recognize that talent comes in unusual packages sometimes.
I love it. I'm inspired. And hey, you know what else might happen? Those people in Covent Garden would put their litter away, and that would be
That would
also
also be welcome. That would be welcome. Though I'm not there to watch it now, but that would be welcome.
John, listen, I have to say once more, before we sign off, this has been a huge personal pleasure because I've been a basketball fan of yours, and then later in my career become just such a follower of your thought leadership in this space. And it's a true honor to have you on the 3 Points podcast. Thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.